Another form of salam and good morning. Another form of databases, which we will discuss later too. Some of the sections that I discussed before, we will come back to in uh, upcoming sessions, okay, in 2 or 3 sessions later. Statistical databases are here. A database limited to statistical measures, primarily counts and sums. Some databases that are used to, for example, have some reports on information like computing counts or sums. For example, sum of all account balance in a bank, or the number of students in a university, just the numbers, not the name of the university. When we are talking about statistical measures, it means we have no access to actual record, but we have access to aggregation or summary of records, statistical data, like count of records, sum of some fields or attributes, average of some fields or attributes, or maximum or minimum. For example, medical record database where researchers access only statistical measures. For example, you are writing a project about COVID-19 virus, and you want to have access to database of all patients that have this disease, COVID. You don't have access to name of these patients or information, personal information of the people who are involved in COVID, but you have access to statistical data. For example, what percent of patients are aged between 20 and 30? And the death in the disease, what the percentage of persons who have more has more who have more risk to die from COVID, for example. Just the statistical data. The statistical data in many cases are not very secret, critical, but they are usable in some researches. For example, for some research to write a paper, to write an algorithm, you can use the statistical data like this medical record database that no one has access to the real records, but they can have queries that return some statistical data about these records of medical. In the statistical database, information retrieved by means of statistical or aggregate queries on an attribute and used for information dissemination and research while keeping individual data values confidential. The information for each record, for each real record, is confidential, but you can have some aggregation or statistical query. A medical record database that supports medical research and doctors. Doctors read and update patient data. Researchers only do statistical queries. So we let the doctors to update information about each patient, or change in or add new records, delete some records. But for example, you as a researcher can have just some statistical data to do your research. Well, do you want to explain?
ثانك يو دكتور. السلايد هذا على قواعد البيانات الإحصائية. يقول لازم تكون محددة وتتخذ لها تدابير أمنية خاصة. مثلا ضربت مثال الدكتورة على الباحثين والأطباء اللي يشتغلون على قاعدة بيانات المرضى. الباحثين لهم الحق الوصول على بس البيانات إحصائية مثل المعدل، العدد، الأكبر، الأصغر، يعني هاي المعلومات الإحصائية. بينما الأطباء لهم الحق لتحديث بيانات الأطباء. ما من حق الباحثين أن يصلون إلى البيانات الخاصة بالأطباء، لذا لازم تتخذ التدابير الأمنية لحماية المعلومات الشخصية الخاصة بالأطباء. وضربت عندنا مثل أيضا المرضى المصابين بكوفيد 19. مو كل واحد يوصل البيانات الشخصية لأي مريض ممكن عنده مضاعفات خطرة.
Well, statistical databases used to provide statistics about various populations. Users permitted to retrieve statistical information and must prohibit retrieval of individual data. By populations, we said set of tuples or records of a relation or table that satisfy some selection condition. For example, we have a person relation schema for illustrating statistical database security. We have name of some person and some social security number, for example, and the income, the salary, the income of a person, address, city, state, zip code, sex, male or female, and last degree. It's the information about some person in a database. And we don't want anyone to have information, have access to one individual record. For example, we don't want anyone to see the salary of a person, but maybe we want to, we will let user to see the maximum salary in the database, the maximum, not the all the information, but we will let them see the, for example, some of the salaries. Well, um, here is a view of this. Maybe this is a user and this is sensitive data. Here is unauthorized access, and there is non-sensitive data and authorized access. It means that user has access to this data, but this user doesn't have access to this data. But from this information, the user can inference, can obtain information from sensitive data. As this user can have access to this information, and here we have metadata, the information about information, so the user knows what information is here and can have access indirectly to that data. I will discuss it in next statistical um, statistical databases.
طبعا بالنسبة للبيانات الإحصائية توفر وصول هنا نضرب مثال على عدد البيانات الإحصائية للسكان. توفر وصول لأشخاص ممكن أن يسترجعون البيانات الإحصائية، وبنفس الوقت لازم تمنع الوصول للبيانات الشخصية. فلذلك هو ضرب هنا عندنا جدول يتكون من مجموعة قيود. هاي القيود تقدر تختار من عندها البيانات، بها بيانات حساسة وبيانات غير حساسة. من خلال البيانات الغير حساسة تقدر توصل للبيانات الحساسة. بالسلايد الثاني أو the next slide هو نفس اليوزر، هو authorized access عنده للقاعدة، نقدر نقول عنه ريسيرشر. هذا يقدر يوصل للبيانات الطبيعية اللي موفرتها مثل الافريج، الاكونت، الشيء، من خلال الاكسس، من خلال الانفيرنس اللي هو الاستنتاج عنده. يقدر يستنتج بيانات حساسة مثل الراتب لشخص معين. هنا هذا راح بالطريقة الثانية unauthorized access. نفس قاعدة البيانات يقدر يطلع من عندها مرة بيانات تهمه ومرة بيانات لا، هو يسعى للحصول.
Thank you. Um, there statistical databases will can result inference problems. I will give you example in some later slides, but uh, first the definition. Um, you consider here is sensitive data. The user can have just some statistical queries. For example, what's the sum of some attributes, or what's the maximum or average or something. And this user can have full access to this data. And maybe the information here in this database is non-sensitive data, and this data, sensitive data, are somehow related. So the user can have some queries here, just statistical queries, and also user can have some queries for records here, and then user can combine the information into databases, into queries, and you can deduce information from this sensitive data. Let me give you an example, and then we will come back here. Uh, is there any, do you need to explain this or not? Okay. So, inference is a security issue with statistical databases. Inference problem exists when sensitive data can be deduced, can be result from non-sensitive data. Attacker or hacker combines information from outside the database with database responses. When attacker combines this information, attacker can find the sensitive data. Let me go to example. Inference and aggregation differ from other security problems since the leakage of information is not a result of penetration of a security mechanism, but rather it is based on the very nature of the information and the semantics of application being automated. What does it mean? Um, we have two form of attacks. One attack, one actually security problem is when, for example, I can see your personal information, but it is a sensitive data, it's private, but I can see this information. Then we can have and we can define some access control mechanism. For example, we say uh, grant select on student to, for example, user one. It's very simple. You don't want someone to see this information. So you have this, you give the permission just to user one. You say grant select on student to user one. So user one can see the information in the student database, but for example, I cannot see this information. But when we are speaking about inference and aggregation, it means you don't want someone to see these records, but you give the permission, you allow a user to use aggregation functions or inferences. For example, I don't have this permission, but I can say this one. Select for example, maximum select average grade from student. You give this permission to some other user. User 2, for example, can have this query, select average grade from student. In table student, this query will compute the average of grades of all the students. But you cannot, this user cannot say, for example, select, let me, is the voice okay for you? Okay. Well, for example, select grade from student where ID equals 1, 2, 3. Well, here, okay, it's okay, no problem. Um, we have two forms of queries. This query select grade from student where ID equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. It means the user who uh, has this query can see the grade, for example, the result of some final exam, for example, the result of exam or the grade for this special student, just this student, ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4. This user, for example, user 1, has this query and has access to the records, to the real records. But another user here has this query. This user cannot see the result or the grade of special student, but this user can see the average of grades for all students. For example, in this class, after final exam, some users can see your results, your grade, but some users cannot see your results or your grades. But this user can see the average of results of your class, the exam, for example, the final exam, or the maximum or the minimum. So, if there is a smart attacker, some attacker or hacker, who has access to this form of queries, maybe he or she can have some sequential queries, one query after one query, for example, some queries, and after those queries, the attacker can deduce, can inference information about each user grade, which we don't want him to see this information. So the leakage of information is not the result of penetration of security mechanism. You have a good security mechanism, but it is based on very nature of information, the nature of information, the semantic of application, and then attacker can reach the sensitive data.
ثانك يو دكتور. هنا قضية الاستدلال إخواني. الاستدلال قلنا هو استنتاج بيانات حساسة من بيانات اعتيادية. الانفرنس والاجريشن يختلفون عن بعضهم في قضية الأمن. تقول بأنه الاستنتاج هذا ما ناتج من خرق السماحيات، لا، ممكن السماحيات عنده قوية ومضبوطة، بس لكن طبيعة البيانات هي تسمح بهالشيء هذا. مثلا اليوزر عنده سماحيات أن يوصل إلى معلومات طبيعية، لكن بنفس الوقت يقدر يشغل استفسارات وكويريز متعددة حتى يحصل على البيانات المطلوبة. ضربت مثال عندكم الدرجات، مثلا نقدر نحصل على الدرجات مجاميع، الدرجة الأعلى، الدرجة الأقل، لكن ما يقدر يحصل على بيانات شخص واحد. لكن باستخدام هاي الاستفسارات المتعددة يقدر يوصل إلى بيانات خاصة بشخص واحد. للمثال الأول، أو اللي عنده السماحيات اللي اعطيناه الجرانت، خلينا نقول انطيناه، يقدر يستخدم إعادة سيلكت جريد فروم ستودنت، اعطيته سماحيات أن يوصل إلى بيانات الطلاب، زين، ويقدر يعدل عليها وفشي. بس الثاني اعطيته سماحيات سيلكت افريج، معدل الدرجات بس. يقول هو هذا الخلل مو عندك بطبيعة، مو عندك الخلل بالجزء الأول اللي منح الصلاحيات، لا، الخلل عندك بطبيعة البيانات وعرضها على المستخدمين. ثانك يو دكتور.
Thank you. I will go further some slides later to first I give you example and then we will come back here. One moment, please. I think it's 16, yes. This is the example. For example, here we have this this anonymous medical data. This information is private, for example. I know that this information is private, it's must be secure, and it's sensitive. Which one? Look here, we have these two here. We have session. One moment, please. Some problem. Well, we have SSN here. This is social security number of a person. You know, it's a unique code, social security number in many countries like USA. And here is the name of person in medical data. These two fields are sensitive data and these are private. But this information are not private. For example, you are writing a project for data mining for a medical diagnosis system, and the medical group give you this information. This information is not private. For example, here the race it means Asian or black or white. Date of birth, and then the sex, female or male, zip code, and marital information, married or unmarried or widowed, for example, and health, the health problem. And here is another database. It's another database, and here is public available voter list, an information which is public about some person who go and vote for some president, for example. Name, address, city, zip code, their date of birth, sex, and party, which is, for example, the Democrat or Liberal. And then here we have we have a person name, here address, and the city and zip code, and their date of birth, and sex, and who is the Democrat. We have two queries. First, count females of a certain age group in certain zip code who have blood pressure. Here is the first one. This is a deductive or statistical query. Just count females of certain age, for example, who is born in 61. In certain zip code, we have access to zip code here, who have uh, blood pressure here. The result of this query is just this. Not this, actually. The result is 1. The query wants to just count the females of a certain age group because this user can just have this form of queries, just deductive queries. Then we have another one. Now we know that there is only one such female. This query should return no data, as one record represents over 100% of result. It means one, just one record. We have just one record. We ask to count the females in this age, in this zip code, who have blood pressures, and there is just one person. Then we have another one here. Request a list of female voters by name who are with certain age group. This database is not private, it's public. So you can have any form of query you want. And you ask the list of female voters, the name of them who are within certain age group. We know there is one person who is this age and has blood pressure. Then we ask the name of a voter who is this age in this age group, and then we deduce that this person Sue Carlson has blood pressure. So with combining two queries, this query is running on this table. This table just has two different fields which are private, so you cannot see what's the name of this person with blood pressure. But you can deduce, you can have this query and go to this result that there is one person in this zip code with blood pressure. Then you give another query on this database which is public, so you can see the name. What's the name of some person in this address in this age group, and there is just one person, so you can combine this information with this information and have this result. This person has this problem with health. Is it clear? Mr. Qasim, is there any need to
اخوان احنا هسه بعدنا بمسألة الاستنتاج او استنباط البيانات من المعلومات المعروضة. عندكم هنا جدولين او قاعدة بيانات اثنين، خلينا نقول كل جهة جدولين. المهم انتم عندكم جدولين هسه. الجدول الاول ببيانات ما تعرض، مثل الرقم الوطني والاسم، لكن البيانات البقية معروضة. الجدول الثاني هو جدول خاص وما يوصل له اي شخص، يعني خلينا نقول عليه امنية عالية او حماية. اشترك ويا الجدول الاول هذا بثلاث حقوق، مثل الحق اللي من هو الديت اوف بيرث والسكس والزت اي بي. من خلال ذن الثلاث حقوق طبعا ذن متاحات إليه بالجدول الأول. عندما يسوي استفسار على الجدول الأول ذن البيانات متاحة إليه، لكن من حصل الوصول إلى هاي البيانات راح يطلع عنده قيد واحد هنا، زين، only one record. هذا القيد راح يربطه بمجموعة استفسارات ثانية ينفذ عليها، راح يحصل على اسم الشخص والعنوان مالته واليا حزب تابع وشنو المرض المصاب به، مثل هو الهيلث مثل ما قايل هنا هو عند البلود برجع. هذه المفروض ما نعطيها السماحية هاي بأن يحصل على البيانات بنسبة 100%، لأنه هي هذه بيانات شخصية مثل خاصة بالمرشحين أو المنتخبين أو شيء ثاني. فلذلك يقول لازم البيانات ما تتوفر بحدود شخصية، بيانات شخصية.